Hey, welcome back. This is Doc Allen for TriariusProject.com with another recipe I think everyone should have in their arsenal. I think it's one of the best steak recipes you'll ever make, and it'll definitely be a crowd pleaser. It takes a little bit of preparation, but I think you're going to find it'll be well worth the effort. So stick around and let's learn how to make a Brazilian picanha steak. So the first thing you want to do is to purchase a solid piece of rump cap. So I don't want you to go out and buy steaks or have them cut by others, but you can buy a pre-packaged rump cap, which is a triangular shape of meat with a large cap of fat on it. Now the important thing here is, firstly, don't cut off the fat cap, but instead flip it over and trim off all of the silver skin and other undesirable gristle from the underside. And then observe the grain of the meat as it travels from one of the peaks down to the base of the triangle. What we're going to do is cut along the grain of the steak rather than across it. Now, in traditional Brazilian churrascarias, sometimes they will be cut across the grain and put them on a sword and cook them that way. But what we are going to do is cut along the grain, because when we finally come to carve our steak, we'll be cutting acrossways. In other words, you should always eat a steak by cutting across its grain. So look at the lines along the meat and cut thick, juicy steaks. Now typically, most people, when they cut a rump cap into steaks, will cut 5 separate pieces. The first steak is usually considered not as high quality as the ones further along, so it's often cut a little thinner, about an inch or so. Your next 2 to 3 steaks, which will be your prime cuts, are cut about an inch and a half thick, as you can see. Don't worry about the smaller triangular bit at the end. Leave it nice and chunky and it'll come out just as fantastic as everything else. So you should end up with 5 steaks, nice and juicy. Try to keep them all of the same kind of density. Once you've done that, we're going to dry brine it openly in the fridge overnight. So as you can see here, I'm making sure to take some coarse salt and to salt the entire steak, including the fat, after which you put it on a tray so that the air can circulate around the entire steak, and place it in your refrigerator overnight. The next day, when you take it out, the steaks should have a deep crimson colour to them, and they should be dry to the touch. This is important because it concentrates the flavour and it draws out excess moisture. The way we're going to cook these steaks is to do a reverse sear. Now, traditionally, we've been told that if you quickly sear a steak, it'll seal in its juices, and then you might put it in an oven and let it rest afterwards in order to cook it from the inside. However, it's been clearly shown that it doesn't seal in the juices, and it's a far superior method to do it the other way around. In other words, we're going to put our steaks either into an oven at about 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 45 degrees Celsius or thereabouts. Alternatively, those of you who are into low and slow smoking might prepare some coals and have them on one side of your barbecue while you place the meat on the other side. Using a probe, we're going to keep an eye on the internal temperature of our steaks until it reaches about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, after which we'll then turn it so that we get a much more even cook. You can see on this film, I've got some coals on the right side of the barbecue and I've put my steaks on the left side. But you could just as easily put them in an oven at about 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 40 to 45 degrees Celsius. Typically, it will take about an hour for the internal temperature of the steak to reach about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, after which you turn them. We now keep a further eye on the internal temperature until it reaches about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, I'm using Fahrenheit because all the low and slow cookers are going to abuse me in the comments section. So even though I'm an Australian, I'm afraid I'm going to have to submit to international protocols here and cook steak using Fahrenheit measurements. After I've flipped it for the second time, what I usually do is take out some wood chips and place onto my coals for a light smoking. Now, you can use a variety of chips. I've used cherry wood in this case, but you could also use apple and hickory or any number of woods to play with. Some people call for wetting the chips before you put them in, others will put them straight on. Try not to overcomplicate things for yourself, just do what feels comfortable and smoke. In this case, I smoked these steaks for about half an hour until the internal temperature reached 110 degrees. You can leave it for a little bit longer, but I certainly wouldn't be leaving it on any longer than 120. Otherwise, the inside of the meat becomes too cooked. So you can see how the steaks have continued to dry and they've started to get a little bit of color. Now when you touch them, they are very soft and tender. The insides have become very soft and gelatinized and will not need very much at all to cook them. Try not to over smoke your meat. Some people find that a little bit uncomfortable, and I've played with the amount of chips I put on, so I might put 2 or 3 handfuls onto the coals over the course of half an hour, and that seems to be plenty. Now, you don't have to smoke your meat, but I think it adds a wonderful flavour to the outside, and I've certainly had no complaints so far. The next thing you want to do is prepare yourself some butcher's paper or aluminium foil in order to rest the meat for at least half an hour before serving it to your guests. Once that's ready, and your meat has reached 110 degrees internal, then you're going to take it and quickly sear it as close to the coals as possible in order to char the outside edges and to develop the flavour even more. This should take no more than 2 or 3 minutes per side. If you want to, you can also turn the fat side for a little bit of extra charring. Just be careful of flare-ups because they can make the fat taste bitter. Quickly take them off the grill when you're done, firmly wrap them in butcher's paper, and then put them to rest in an esky or any other warm surface, as I said, for about half an hour. When they come out, they should be soft to touch and they should smell divine. Having released some of their juices, they're now ready to cut. As I said before, we cut our steaks along the grain, as you can see, and then we're going to cut them in 5 to 10 millimeter medallions across the grain, which allows for a very juicy and easy to chew bite-sized piece. Our Brazilian friends who claim that the picanha is the queen of steaks will insist on you eating the fat and not cutting it off. If you want to offend someone from Latin America, yeah, you go ahead and cut the fat off. But all of the labour of love that you've put into it means that this is the tastiest fat you're probably ever going to eat. So there you have it, a lovely Brazilian picanha steak. It is a steak that requires a little bit of preparation and a little bit of time and work, but the result is oh so tender and fantastic. So I hope you give this recipe a try soon. Please leave your comments and own experiences, and feel free to drop me an email if you've got any other questions or concerns. Till next time, walk tall. Enjoy.